Hello, old school comics reviews. Okay, today we want to look at Archie, Volume 1, The Best of Dan DeCarlo, which was published by IDW this year, 2010. Um, First things first, I just want to give a quick shout out to Inside Man, who's a fellow blogger who kind of put me up on this. I saw the hardcover version in a retail bookstore, and but it was going to be a lot more money that I wanted to spend that day. And I came online. I'm like, does anybody know when this is going to come out in paperback? And he was like, yeah, it eventually will, but you're probably going to have to wait. Meanwhile, if you go over to Dreamland Comics, you can get a really good deal on the actual hardcover. And I was able to get a really good discount. So, props to Inside Man, props to Dreamland Comics. I'm going to try to put a link to his blog, Swear All You Like, as well as the website for Dreamland Comics, because if you're a hardcover guy, you can get a lot of good deals there. And after you check out their stuff, go to my blog and look at my stuff. Thank you. I first got hip to Dan DeCarlo. Well, first, this is Archie, and of course, Archie is a comic book icon, whether you want to admit it or not. If you go out there on the street right now and stop any random 10 people, I guarantee you the majority of them will have some idea of who Archie Andrews is. Even if they haven't ever read a comic book, even if they haven't watched the cartoon shows for like 10, 15 years, they know something about Archie and Jughead and Betty and Veronica. Okay, the whole reason I got hip to Dan DeCarlo, though, is from being into Love and Rockets, which was done by the brothers Hernandez. And I've read like old interviews where they've talked about their influences. Of course, they've talked about like old Silver Age comics. They've talked about Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Marvel and DC stuff. They mentioned Heavy Metal magazine, you know, the science fiction fantasy magazine, but they also mentioned a lot of newspaper strips and things like that. They said their mom always encouraged them to read, so they would read, you know, anything and everything. They talk a lot about Peanuts by Charles Schultz. They talked a lot about Dennis the Menace, and of course they talked about Archie Comics. And you know, and so from them talking about that, that's how I know who Dan DeCarlo is. And just going back to Hernandez brothers briefly, you can really see the influence in their early 80s work. You can really see the influence of Bob Montana, who was the creator of Archie, and Dan DeCarlo, as well as all those other, you know, Marvel, DC, Silver Age guys. So just a little bit that I do know about Dan DeCarlo. I know he's done a lot of commercial artwork. He's done a lot of stuff for like magazines and things. He pretty much got his start in comic books by working for Marvel, which was called Timely Comics at the time, back in the 40s. And Stan Lee gave him his first regular job on a comic book called Millie the Model, which was kind of like their sort of teen comedy romance type thing. He got hired by Archie Comics in the 1950s, and that's pretty much where his career pretty much took off. He pretty much set the standard and raised the bar for that type of artwork, and he's the best known artist for Archie Comics right after Bob Montana. And he really had he brought a whole level of draftsmanship. He had this really eye for fashion that showed what was possible that you could do within, you know, with the strip, even with the confines of, you know, that basic house style. A lot of what you see in like these sort of teen comedy comics of that time and since then was really influenced by Bob Montana. He was to that field, to that genre, what guys kind of like Kirby and Buscema, John Buscema and Neil Adams were to the superhero world. He was the guy that the other artists kind of looked up to. I know Dan created Josie from Josie and the Pussycats and named her after his wife. He also co-created Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I believe he was let go from Archie Comics several years ago because of, I don't know if it was exactly because of a lawsuit he brought, but I'm sure it didn't help. But he filed a lawsuit right around the time the Josie and the Pussycats movie came out. And like I said, Archie Comics ended up letting him go. I don't know the exact in and outs or details of the case, but I believe from what I understand, I believe he did not get what he was asking for out of that suit. I do believe he did get paid when they did the live action Sabrina the Teenage Witch series for television, and then after that, I believe the comic book work he was getting was from Bongo Comics, which does the Simpsons comic books. Okay, now like I said, Dan also did a lot of pinup art and magazine gag cartoons and gag pieces and things like that. And looking at it in a 21st century, a lot of humor is pretty much dated. It's kind of tasteful, but it's all on the kind of sexy, spicy, racy edge. And you can make up your own mind if you think it's a little chauvinistic or not, or whatever. But it's definitely all about that kind of va 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 boom. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. It's all about, the corny regular guy ogling or groping the hot chick, or, the old man businessman and the sexy secretary. Ooh, all that type of thing. Like I said, I'll try to put up a link so you can see some more of that type of stuff. Moving on to this collection here. This is, like I said, Archie, the Best of Dan DeCarlo, Volume 1, IDW. Most of the stories here, actually, though, are pulled from the Betty and Veronica series. And they go from like the late 50s to the late 60s. And the majority of the stories are written by Frank Doyle. And it's pretty much what you probably expect. Wacky hijinks of teens. Lots of the humor revolves around one character or another trying to outsmart someone, but they only end up outsmarting themselves, Not terribly complex, a lot of good-natured humor, trying to be charming. Occasionally you do get an oddball story thrown in there. And it's interesting because it's that weird particular Silver Age abstract wackiness. You're getting it here. You get it in old Flash comics. Occasionally you get it in old Marvel comics. Just where stuff just happens just cause. One story here, Archie actually breaks the fourth wall. The plot has to do with him going back and forth between Betty and Veronica, Betty, Veronica, Betty, Veronica, Betty, Veronica. And at one point, Archie stops, and then he looks directly at the reader and he says, "Oh, you don't approve? What, you think I'm going to get caught up?" Well, he didn't say caught up, but you think I'm going to get caught in the middle? Don't worry, I've been playing this game much too long, or something to that effect, Another story has to do with the fact that Veronica is able to talk upside down. And what it is Veronica standing on her head, and when she's speaking, the word balloons and all the lettering is drawn upside down. And then, of course, she stands right side up, and she's like, how's that? And the other characters are, that's much better. And at least now we can read what you're saying. And another story has Betty being able to turn things into gold. There's no real reason she's able to turn things into gold. It's not a dream or anything like that. It just so happens she's reading a story of King Midas and the Golden Touch, and just for that 6 pages, Betty's able to just turn things into gold. Just cause it's another wacky day in Riverdale, and that's that. Another thing I wanted to kind of touch on is the whole Archie, Betty, Veronica dynamic. Now, contrary to popular perception, or at least as far as these particular stories are concerned, Archie is not really torn between the two women. It's strongly implied that Veronica is really the main girlfriend and Betty is the backup. And everybody in the comic book knows this, and everybody's cool with it. Archie knows it, Veronica knows it, Betty knows it. The only time people suffer or have any sort of conflict is when one girl or the other tries to spend more than her allotted time with Archie, So basically, Archie's the pimp. Archie is the Mac, okay? People talk about shows like Mad Men, which kind of looks back at that sort of casual chauvinism that was going on at the time. And here is a piece of art or a piece of entertainment from that particular time period that kind of confirms that idea. Another actually interesting story in here is one where the plot is basically Archie's trying to make Veronica jealous, and he keeps going back to Betty. And of course, Betty's helping him. And in the meantime, though, she's kind of telling Veronica, what's going on. So Archie has to keep going back and forth to thinking he's going to get one up on somebody, but at the same time, here's Betty kind of conniving and saying things behind his back and so on and so forth. Which kind of puts another spin on the whole thing of Betty being the sweet one or the girl next door. This is really like something you'd see from a plot from one of these modern day teen soap opera rich mean girl things. This is like something out of like Gossip Girl or Beverly Hills 90210 or something like that, but it's portrayed as like the wacky little love games these teens play. What else? Well, the only other thing is the obvious thing of there's no real reason why these two girls should be like swooning and just waiting for Archie. Either one of them would have guys lined up around the block for them. Veronica is beautiful and she's rich. Betty is pretty. She's smart. She's the most popular girl. Anyone would either one of them would have like tons of options in the real world. So there's really no reason they should be kowtowing to this schlep Archie Andrews. But whatever, it's comics. Let's see here. The one thing I do think is kind of disappointing about this edition here is that there's like little, almost no background information on the creators or the company or anything like that. There is a little bio on Dan DeCarlo, but it's the sort of little thing you would get in any book you would pick up by anybody. There's 2 or 3 paragraphs saying Dan was born in such and such. He's famous for doing blah blah. I just think it would have been really interesting or really helpful if they had like included maybe a little essay in the beginning or maybe a little introduction talking about why the character is popular, why Dan DeCarlo as an artist is important, maybe how the whole Archie line fits in with comics and comics of the time and comics in general, or with the whole genre mint and things like that. And just put in some sort of like historical context or social context or whatever. But that's my only quibble. So anyway, check it out if you like. If you want to expand your mind, if you want to check out something that's a little bit different than guys like getting blowed up or whatever. And that's it. I gotta thank you very much for listening to what I gotta say. Tell me if you think I should do more of these type of things or whatever. Leave any comments you want. Thanks, and you have a great one.